It's November the 18th, 2021, and welcome to the Water Action Platform. This week, following the COP26 event in Glasgow earlier this month, we have a climate focus. I'm delighted today to formally launch a new initiative called the Trial Reservoir. The Trial Reservoir will significantly enhance how water utilities adopt carbon reduction technologies. Our technology showcases today cover flood risk mitigation strategies and a Swedish process which turns bio-waste into a useful biofuel. In our regular vaccines and variants section, Joe Burgess explains how we can all stay safe. If you or any of your loved ones don't like needles, then you're going to want to hear what she has to say. All of this is made possible by our sponsors and partners who come from a broad church of organisations, ranging from utilities to consultants, contractors, tech companies, professional associations and federations, investors and OEMs. We now have over 1,000 organisations registered on the Water Action Platform, which is proudly open to all and free at the point of use. We hold firm to our mission to facilitate collaboration and the sharing of knowledge across the water sector, irrespective of geographic boundaries. And as part of that mission, I'm honoured today to formally launch the Trial Reservoir, a new and unique source of funding allocated specifically to helping water utilities achieve carbon net zero. But let's start by talking about COP26. How was it for you? If you were a teacher marking their homework, what grade would you give the politicians and delegates? My mark would be a C-. There was undoubtedly some positive progress over the 2 weeks, but it fell horrifically short of what is needed. A 1.5 degrees C rise in global temperatures is now all but inevitable. Fragile habitats such as coral reefs will be destroyed, and the domino effect will have consequences for us all. The warnings have been around for decades and were highlighted in the most recent IPCC report on the climate crisis earlier this year. Those findings were brutally stark and set the tone for COP26, yet the latest data from respected Global Carbon Project, published as COP26 was in progress, underscore our dangerous dependence on fossil fuels. The abrupt decline in global carbon dioxide emissions seen during the pandemic will be all but erased by the end of this year. Carbon emissions from fossil fuels will rise by 4.9% in 2021, essentially wiping out the brief 5.4% drop we saw in 2020. This recovery is faster than most scientists predicted and indicates that emissions will rise anew next year without substantial immediate action. In the water sector, we have a particular responsibility. We are a sector which not only utilises significant energy, but we also have great potential to create a positive impact. For example, from generating green energy from bioresources to floating solar arrays on our reservoirs. We can produce a double whammy beneficial effect, reducing energy demand and creating new green energy. Within the sector, we all know this. And I firmly believe that the great majority of people in the water sector want to do more. But the pace of change is too slow. We simply cannot continue as we have done. Our pace to date can at best be described as genteel, and at worst is irresponsibly sleepy. It is with this background that today we are launching the Trial Reservoir, a new source of funding to help water utilities adopt technologies which will accelerate our path to achieving carbon neutrality. The Trial Reservoir is a pot of money which ISLE is giving to the water sector. It will be used to fund trials anywhere in the world of technologies which can have a beneficial carbon outcome. We're all familiar with the usual process through which technologies are trialled in the water sector. A technology company comes to a utility promising that they can save millions. All that's needed is a trial to prove their worth. Invariably, this is where the process stalls. The utility is interested, but doesn't have a bottomless pit of money to trial each new technology that comes to its door. This is where the Trial Reservoir can help. Money can be drawn down from the reservoir to fund the trial, on the simple understanding that if the trial is a success, i.e. if it meets clear, ambitious, pre-agreed success criteria, then the utility will adopt the technology and the tech company who received the funding can pay the money back into the reservoir. This means the reservoir is evergreen, able to continually recycle the funds into trial after trial after trial. The trial reservoir will take 100% of the financial risk of the trial failing. This enables the municipality to focus on what they do best, namely the installation and operation of water and wastewater assets. And it lets the technology companies preserve their ever-limited capital. The process sounds simple. Hell, it is simple, but it does require utilities to engage in a way that they have seldom done before, in particular, thinking through the procurement options before a trial commences. Now, over the past 3 months, as we've developed the trial reservoir concept, we've spoken to over 30 utilities. All of them have been positive, and we have 2 initial trials currently being undertaken to test the trial reservoir concept. With each day that passes, the trial reservoir gains more momentum, and I genuinely believe that this could change how innovation is adopted in the water sector. I'm incredibly proud to share that the trial reservoir is supported by a number of sponsors from around the world. The investment firm, Pure Terra, the family fund, Inheritance, based out of Singapore, the global engineering consultancy, WSP, Hydro International from the UK, and Matito from the UAE, Xylem from, well, everywhere across the world, and the UK water company, United Utilities. Bertzman Capital from the USA, who have a particular interest in supporting trials in low and medium income countries. And finally, Stratford Capital from Australia. I am supremely grateful to these organisations for their support, which will help ensure that the trial reservoir is a success. We have a real opportunity here to change how the water sector operates. Time is not on our side. If you're in any doubt, think about your children and your future grandchildren. They will hold this generation responsible for not acting when we could. If you want to get involved, whether you're a tech company, a utility, or just a supporter, please let me know. Drop me an email or visit our website. The link's here. Our intention is to provide regular updates on how the trial reservoir is progressing right here on our monthly Water Action Platform broadcasts. The world may be on fire, but we are not going down without a fight. We now come to our regular vaccines and variants update from Dr. Joe Burgess. Joe, over to you.
Hi, and welcome back. This month we're going to be focusing on staying safe, both at work and at home. Outside of work, a recent poll in the US found that between 10 and 15% of people that haven't had a COVID-19 vaccine yet aren't against it in particular, they just hate needles. And researchers at the US National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases have investigated administering the Oxford or AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine through the nose, so far only in animal models. The study compared injected and intranasal vaccines and found that both routes of administration produce nice high antibody levels, but the nasal spray actually outperformed the injection. This is still quite early stage research, but the early signs are looking quite promising. At the same time, Russia announced just last month in October that they're testing a nasal spray form of their Sputnik V vaccine against COVID-19 among adult volunteers in a trial in St. Petersburg. This is a phase 2/3 trial, so a little bit further along the research pathway than the Oxford AstraZeneca one. The guys in St. Petersburg are also testing a nasal vaccine that's suitable for children between 8 and 12 years of age, and that's even further along the research pathway. It may even be available in late 2021 or early 2022. On the other side of the world, at the University of Queensland in Australia, a group of researchers have spent years developing a skin patch to deliver vaccines like polio and influenza. This kind of vaccine doesn't need needles and it doesn't need cold storage. They're now finding out if the same technology can be used for the COVID-19 vaccines. It's just a 1 centimetre square patch of plastic, basically, that's coated with a dried vaccine that's much more stable than the liquid form. Vaccines delivered this way tend to elicit stronger immune responses because the skin is full of immune cells. When the flu vaccine is administered via the skin patch, just 1/6 of the normal dose can be used because it produces a much stronger response. This again is still early stage, but a trial of the skin patch on humans begins next year, so it's painless and it also has a much longer shelf life. If we turn our attention to safety at work, in the water sector, we already had guidelines developed well before the pandemic for protecting staff at wastewater treatment works, in particular from viruses, including waterborne and hemorrhagic fever viruses, things much more dangerous than SARS-CoV-2. Those guidelines have been updated, but it's important to note that until now, not one single case of transmission via contact with water, whether it's sewage or river water containing sewage or any other kind of water, has been reported. Studies conducted with water have not detected any infectious virus particles in water, even in water containing sewage. The results for infectivity in the articles that we reported on in the webinars recently, Grimaldi and Westhouse, you might remember, have all reported negative infectivity, even though they found SARS-CoV-2 RNA and they found virions, they found particles. However, we do know that the main route of infection is the nose. The secondary routes are the mouth and the eyes. So wear your masks, wear your face shields, wear your safety goggles and gloves, wash your hands. Try to stay out of the activated sludge spray, or if you get caught in an aerosol, then wash thoroughly. So all the usual measures of PPE that we use at wastewater treatment works, not only because of COVID-19. All of these guides that's shown on the screen at the moment have been updated in the light of the pandemic, and you'll receive the slides after the webinar, so you'll be able to click on the links and download all of the information. That brings me to the end of my spot for this month, and I will see you next time.
Thank you, Jo. We now come to our technology showcases, and we have two this month. The first is from WSP, one of the world's leading professional engineering firms. Now, WSP have been particularly active in the run-up to COP, reframing some of the current hot topics and sparking fresh conversations and finding new solutions. And so it was in that context that I spoke with Hamish Hall, the service line director for WSP's water risk management team. Hamish has a particular passion for coastal management, river engineering, and climate change adaptation. Over the last 30 years, he's worked on projects all across the world, from protecting nuclear power stations to helping the Red Cross understand flooding. Well, I spoke with Hamish from his home office at the end of his garden. Now, watch out for the extra animation. It might at first appear a bit rudimentary, but I think it's one of the most informative and imaginative animations that I've ever seen. Hamish, it's brilliant to be with you. Thank you for taking the time. COP26, climate crisis all around us, flood risk being a growing issue. Talk me through, what are the key concerns that we should be worried about?
So I've got a couple of things that are keeping me awake at night. One is that sea level rise is going to continue, and increased precipitation and storminess is going to increase, even if we're really good at reducing our carbon emissions. And so we need to plan for that. And how do we fund future flood risk management? And how do we get a community to adapt to this inevitable increase in flood risk?
Okay, so what are the things we can do? Imagine you were a politician, Boris Johnson, and you're there wondering how you're going to address this climate crisis. What is it? Brilliant. What is it you're going to do?
So I've invested a lot of WSP's might in numerical modelling now. So if I may, I might just take you through an animation that we've prepared.
Please do.
So I shall press play now. So we start with a dusty workbench and we wipe the debris of the last assessment clear. We bring out a fresh piece of paper, or in this place cardboard, and we think about how has the river developed the landscape? How do we then relate to this landscape that floods? Floods come, floods go, but actually nobody really minds until we start developing. And the historical development generally took account of flood risk. But over the years now, and I'll just press pause, we've seen people begin to encroach into the floodplain. And now that's leading to problems in their own right. And now if we put climate change on top, let's play again, we see that some of those properties are beginning to get flooded. Now that's quite serious for us. So not only do we have a immediate economic impact, we're beginning to stifle development. Pressing pause again, we have blighted a large section of our community who are in that floodplain. Quite often they're the poorer section of the community, and we have stifled some of the important development that we need to sustain our and other growing economies. And we can't leave it as it is, because we know that sea level rise and precipitation is going to get worse. So how do we address some of those problems? And so what's really worrying me is, where do we get the money to buy time for these communities to adapt? Where do we get the funding to raise flood defences or to move people away? And so, concluding this animation, I'm thinking, why don't we start building in the floodplain? Let's be brave. Let's use that new development. Let's create, let's say, new infrastructure, roads that we can build on, and create the flooding elsewhere, places where we want the flooding to happen. And now, in this animation, you see we've got a safe area downstream. We've allowed development to continue. And most importantly, we've given time for the community to adapt. That private development has led to the funding that allows us to let this community survive. And hopefully we're hitting some of the sustainability measures upstream by using natural flood management and creating a better environment. So, contrary to national planning guidance, actually, I think we should be embracing public-private partnerships in managing flood risk.
And that's an incredible story of counterintuitive, build on the floodplain. So just give me some examples of what the future could look like. You've got a flood-proofed house, is that right?
Yes. So we are working with some communities. It's going to be very hard to stop the water coming out. So why don't we lift the house out? So we, in partnership with others, have come up with the concept of a house that indeed Boris Johnson introduced, that raises up out of the floodplain with appropriate flood warning.
Well, I was just about to say, paint for me a picture in the last minute here. Paint for me a picture of the future, what it will look like if I'm walking around a housing estate on a floodplain. Will it look any different to what we see today in a housing estate?
No, but I would hope the community understands the risk. I would hope they have measures already inbuilt from the developer at how they deal with it, and a local authority who understands that some of these planning horizons are time limited, and we need to use the next 50 or 100 years to gently move developments out of the floodplain, or to get new ways of getting funding to maintain the protection there.
Excellent. Hamish, it's been wonderful speaking with you. Thank you very much for your time. I'll let you get back into your proper house. It looks like you've been ousted out of the house to live in a garden shed.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I prefer it in the shed, I have to say.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you, Hamish. Our second technology showcase is from Seagreen in Sweden, with their Oxypower HTC process, which turns wet bio-waste into useful biofuel. Now, Seagreen have set themselves some gloriously ambitious goals. By 2030, they aim to treat 5% of the sludge that's produced in their target geographies and target sectors, which they calculate could alleviate carbon equivalent to 10% of the emissions produced today by Germany. They have a full-scale operational facility on a pulp and paper mill in Finland, and a second unit being built on wastewater sludges in Sweden. Here is Erik Oden, CEO, to explain more.
I'm here at Stora Enso's mill in Heinola, Finland. Seagreen works together with Stora Enso to build the world's first Oxypower HTC plant, using our unique technology to convert wet sludge into solid biofuel. The plant is now operational, and each year it will turn 18,000 tons of sludge into biofuel. The impact of sludge handling is not so well known, but it is a major climate and environmental problem. Sludge from the treatment of wastewater from industries, households and food production causes greenhouse gas emissions, can spread dangerous substances in the environment, and can pose health risks. With our new technology, we can lift sludge handling into the modern circular bioeconomy and harvest useful resources from what have been, until now, seen as waste. In this plant, The sludge is turned into a carbonated biofuel, using oxygen from the air to power the process. Here at Stora Enso's mill, the biofuel is incinerated in the boiler, which means they need less external fuel. The boiler produces energy for the mill and for heating the town of Heinola. The biofuel is safer and easier to handle than sludge, with a volume of less than 20% of the sludge. Here in Heinola, the water removed from the sludge is used to increase the mill's biogas production and to help reduce the need of chemicals for the biological water treatment. Seagreen's sludge handling technology effectively stops greenhouse gas emissions from sludge storage. The biofuel produced can replace fossil fuels. In future plants, it will be possible to separate nitrogen from the process and replace fossil fuel-based fertilizers. This first commercial Oxypower HTC plant is just the beginning. Here sludge is no longer a waste problem and a climate threat, but the source of useful bio-based products. This is the solution to the global sludge challenge.
I love that ending. This is the future to the global sludge challenge. It's such a Viking ending, isn't it? The payback from a Seagreen facility is typically between 4 to 6 years, and that's driven by the fact that there's an 80% reduction in sludge that requires transportation and disposal, replaced instead by the generation of large quantities of useful biocoal. If you want more information, please visit their website. Our sector expert this week is Professor Alastair Driver, arguably the leading ecologist here in the UK and a director of Rewilding Britain. Almost 40 years ago, Alastair was appointed as the first conservation officer for the organisation, which is now known as Thames Water. He is an international expert with a wealth of knowledge on how to manage natural systems to maximise their ecological benefits. Now, I met Alastair a few weeks ago, just after he'd been presenting to Ofwat, the UK water sector regulator. Here is a 3-minute summary of what he talked to them about. I started by asking him to explain what rewilding was.
Rewilding is essentially the large-scale restoration of ecosystems to the point where nature is allowed to take care of itself. And where you are doing this at scale, you will see that you can start to measure the benefits of these improvements to biodiversity, improvements to carbon sequestration and water quality, flood risk management, and whilst also, of course, providing health and well-being opportunities, education opportunities, access, etc. We've got lots of data on this. I have been collecting information from over 30 projects in England in the last few months, and it is showing that there are, for example, significant increases in the job opportunities, a 54% increase in FTE's worth of jobs, a 13-fold increase in volunteers. Actually, interestingly, an increase on the rewilding sites in the numbers of cattle on these sites, because you need large herbivores to help perpetuate or restore natural processes, that interaction between animals and vegetation and soils and water. The big impact, of course, is on sheep reduction in a British context. So far fewer sheep, but actually slightly more cattle roaming over very large areas, occasionally with a few rare breed pigs and ponies, etc. Getting those herbivores back into the landscape, working across huge areas, so they've got access to very large areas, is the way forward in terms of helping to restore natural processes at scale on water company land. Now, I know about the constraints around cryptosporidium, etc., and water access, but there are water companies like United Utilities who have found a way to make this happen without increasing these kind of risks significantly. And what they are doing, they are now able to show through the evidence that is being gathered from sites like Wild Ennerdale and Wild Haweswater, is fantastic recovery of biodiversity. And there's lots of field monitoring going on to help demonstrate benefits to carbon, water quality, flood risk management, etc. So for me, it's all about ramping up this activity massively, not tweaking it, not saying, oh, we're doing quite a bit already, you know, that's pretty good, you know, look at what we're doing here, look at what we're doing here. This needs to be a virtually universal activity if water companies are going to contribute significantly towards the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis.
Alastair is a truly fascinating man with whom I could spend many hours. His passion for ecology and rewilding is infectious, and the advice that he can bring the water sector on how we can better manage our land bank to both preserve the ecology and ensure that it captures as much carbon as possible is exceptional. Thank you, Alastair. And finally, tomorrow, November the 19th, 2021, is World Toilet Day. World Toilet Day celebrates toilets and raises awareness of the 3.6 billion people who live without access to safely managed sanitation. Every year, UN Water sets the theme for Toilet Day, and this year the theme is valuing toilets. And you know what? No one cares more about toilets or values them more highly than the 3.6 billion people who don't have access to one. My personal journey into the water sector began in 1998 when I was a student at university sitting in a public health engineering lecture, and the professor shared that 30,000 people a day die from diseases that we could avoid through better sanitation. The call for action around World Toilet Day is always a difficult one. For many of us, lacking a toilet is an incredibly foreign concept, and it's hard to truly understand the inequality that it creates. We could talk about how investing $1 in sanitation provides $5 of return through public health and education. But this year, UN Water asks you to make appreciation of toilets the call for action. So if you have time, maybe inform yourself by visiting the World Toilet Day website so you can truly understand how big a problem the lack of access to sanitation is. And if you don't have time, well, why not just quickly thank your toilet for everything it does for you and acknowledge the privilege of having your own private place to go. With that, we come to the end of this week's broadcast. Many thanks to our sponsors and partners. Next month, our pre-Christmas broadcast has a micro-pollutant focus to it. And fingers crossed, I will provide an update on how the Trial Reservior is developing following today's launch. If you want to know more, and if in particular, how you can benefit from the Trial Reservior, register at the ISLE website or just drop me an email. Keep asking questions, keep sharing, and keep safe.